going on, Dragon Ball fans? Welcome back to another Dragon Ball fan manga breakdown review, where today we're going to be reviewing a fan manga entitled Dragon Ball Multiverse, which is a fan-made manga set within its own timeline outside of the main canon of Akira Toriyama and Toei Animation, involving both characters from Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z, as the overall concept of Dragon Ball Multiverse involves universes from all timelines and dimensions to gather together and battle in one tournament in order to determine which one of the many participating universes competing in this tournament will be the first to obtain the prize of the Dragon Balls for their own personal usage, as for many years now I've been reviewing and introducing all kinds of Dragon Ball fan mangas to the world created by the community for the community. So if you guys are interested in seeing and reading up on incredible stories and concepts such as Dragon Ball AF, Dragon Ball Legendary, Dragon Ball New Age, Dragon Ball X, and many others, then feel free to check out the Dragon Ball fan manga playlist in the description box for more videos such as this, as right now we are going to be diving into a brand new manga chapter. As before we begin, if you are new to this channel, hit that subscribe button and turn on all notifications to be the first to know when a new video is posted onto this channel, as we kick off Dragon Ball Multiverse manga chapter number 31 with Tapion having to battle against an older version of Krillin, in which Krillin goes on to state he is in defensive position. I should not keep the Kaioken for long, I must attack. And at that given point we see how Krillin goes on the attack, but Tapion immediately responds by wielding his sword and attacking Krillin. But as the fight continues, most interestingly enough, we see how Kaioken Krillin is able to get a nice elbow to the gut of Tapion, teleports behind him and knocking him further back in the arena, as we see Tapion slow himself down, but Tapion is still primarily focused on winning this fight given his backstory just 2 chapters ago, as Krillin goes on to state what strength, he has some sort of shield, as Tapion within himself goes on to state he is too fast for me, I can't touch him, sorry, I'll have to be more violent then. And then at that given point we see how all of a sudden Tapion goes on to state, get out and fight for me. And at that point we see the exact smoke, the exact mist begin to appear, and to everyone's surprise, Haruta God exits Tapion body in the flesh before Krillin, as Krillin goes on to state, well that's something else, and Tapion commands Haruta God to actually fight for him, as later on we get to see how even Vegeta begins to acknowledge Haruta God and saying, so, you can keep it whole in you after all. And then Goku goes on to state Tapion and Haruta God are friends now, and even Rachi from the other universe goes on to state, thanks to my amazing talents, because it's in the previous manga chapters that we learn what happens to Tapion and Haruta God, in which at that point Haruta God is smashing the entire arena with Tapion having to state, sorry, I'm only here for the wish. And at that point Krillin moves back and saying, Kame, so he's charging up the Kamehameha as Haruta God's foot is beginning to crash on down onto Krillin, as Krillin finally fires off the Kamehameha, but to Krillin's surprise bounces off of Haruta God's leg, and we see how Krillin is stunned even after using Kaioken. As he looks up with Haruta God having to fire down a blast upon him, Krillin gets out of the way and saying, stronger Kaioken, in which he finally goes on to use the Kienzan in attempting to slash Haruta God in two, but the minute the Kienzan actually makes contact with Haruta God's body, Haruta God all of a sudden disappears, and Krillin goes on to state nothing is working on him. Well, it's clear, it must not be him that I have to attack, knowing that the person that he has to attack other than Haruta God has to be Tapion, so Krillin smartly enough actually moves away from Haruta God and targeting Tapion. So then we see how once Tapion notices that Krillin is after him, we see how Krillin bounces off of Tapion and the fight continues. But what's really awesome about this is seeing how Haruta God is actually working with Tapion in his attempts of smashing Krillin, but Krillin is actually so quick that he's bouncing off of Haruta God's tail, which in turn cannot allow Haruta God to make any sort of physical contact with Krillin's body. And at that point Tapion is looking and saying finally, he's getting tired, he's almost finished, because he knows that Krillin can't outrun Haruta God forever, especially during the tournament and its given rules. As we see Krillin try to outmaneuver Haruta God, as Yamcha goes on to state, it had to happen one day, he can't aim anymore, the miseries of old age. And it looks like Krillin really doesn't have that sharp of an aim anymore, because according to Yamcha it looks like he's missing now. But even as Krillin gets behind Haruta God, he's beginning to unleash a barrage of attacks which ultimately get the best of Haruta God, as Krillin goes on to maximize his Kaioken, as Tapion says, while Haruta God is in smoke, he is going to attack me. I must be, and the second he's about to complete his sentence, Krillin decks Tapion right in the gut, and Tapion goes down, the smoke vanishes. Krillin looks down on Tapion and saying, be kind and stay this way for 30 seconds, please. And Tapion is down, he knows that he's hurt and saying, I don't have the experience for such a fight, but then, for from the smoke, we see how a tail just comes out of nowhere and swooping in and attempts to attack Krillin. But just as that happens, we see how Krillin dodges, and Krillin in this manga chapter was actually very impressive because a massive fist just exits the cloud and punching Krillin, but Krillin manages to catch it, but with the other fist having to come into play, it knocks Krillin on down into the ground. However, Krillin gets back up, but the tail cuts him down. Then we see how Tapion slowly stands up and he looks over and Krillin is lying into the dirt, with the announcers having to state victory of Tapion from Universe 3. And Tapion stands up and he says to himself, it was too close. I must find a more effective technique. As we see one of the tournament holders goes on to state, we're in the middle of the second round, so it's time for a break. We will again create tables in the spaces for the fighters. And Goten goes on to say, hey dad, I bet you were expecting that with, and all of a sudden he looks and Vegeta and Goku are sitting on the table, and Goku goes on to state, so I'll take the roast beef, double the pasta, hot potatoes, salad potatoes, ramen, the entire page, the cake, the toast, and Vegeta replies by saying, I'll have double of what he's having. And over out in the distance, Super Buu goes on to say a break already, with one of the Kaioshin as Gohan walks on by having to say, sit son Gohan, we thought about your request. As one of the Kais goes on to tell Gohan, at the end of this round, we will use one of the sets of Dragon Balls to resurrect the victims of the first 2 rounds, with Gohan having to say thank you very much, with the Kaioshin having to add by saying it will be welcomed by warriors of other universes too. We have another question. That Universe 18 also has a Vegito, with Gohan having to say, yeah, they told me he separated once in the body of Buu, with one of the Kaioshin having to reply by saying, of course, the Kaioshins that Buu absorbed, they cancelled the merger, and Gohan goes on to state, but why? As one of the Kais replies by saying, the Potaras are only made for Kaioshins. The existence of Vegito is blasphemy, with Gohan having to say, ah yes, Vegito told me that normally they only work for you. The old Kaioshin had enchanted them so they can also work for Goku, with the Kaioshin having to speak amongst each other and saying, that's it, our essence in Buu couldn't guess that Vegito existed for a reason, so it unfused him. As the Kaioshin goes on to state, nevertheless, this Vegito is far too powerful. This confirms that we should not use the Potaras on anyone. As the other Universal Saiyans walk by Gohan and Goku and saying, we've come for, well, you know, and that's when Goku's like, what, food? And Vegeta's like, no, not that. And that's when Gohan gets up and he says, your Kakarot got carried away, with Vegeta having to say, do not toy with us, your brat is fine. We held our end of the deal, with Gohan having to say, fine. In Universe 9, there is an old Kaioshin who appeared during the fight against Cold. He has the power to increase strength. If you are worthy, of course. I kept my promise, but I warn you, if you threaten him or attack him, you will be sent back to your universe. Be very kind to him. And that's when Vegeta says, are you kidding us? With Gohan having to say, change your attitude and you will become much stronger. And then we get to see how later on, one of the tournament holders encounters Jaice and saying, your chocolate bun, sir. And then Jaice hits him across the head, and the tournament holder is saying, you really hurt me, you really hurt me. But later on, we get to see how Frieza, to perfectly monitor everybody and saying, good, will finally be able to follow their plans without our presence being detected. As he looks out and seeing Gohan, Tapion, and saying, set other cameras. One of them surely has to access the Dragon Balls. As Frieza goes on to beg the question and saying, could Ginyu be in Jaice? No, the others would have realized unless they would have covered for him by now. They admired their boss. They kept his name. No, they would never dare hide such a thing from me. And that's when we get to see one of Frieza's henchmen walk by and saying, Master, with Frieza saying, what? As the henchman goes on to say, I just wanted to warn you that if the camera changes universe, we'll no longer receive images. But there is a recorder so we can watch it while it returns. With Frieza having to say, it's better than nothing. I imagine it was Ginyu watching me. I'm getting paranoid because if you guys remember, back in the previous chapters, Captain Ginyu from this universe actually rebelled against Frieza. As we get to see, the narrator goes on to state, we get back to the games with Vegito of Universe 16 against XXI of Universe number 5, which we get to see how the Elder Kai goes on to state, wait a minute, XXI? No, that's impossible. How could they bring such a being? Did the Kaioshins accept that? And we see how Yamcha and Tien are in the back and saying, well, who is this guy? And then from the shadows, we see an elderly person emerge, and the Elder Kai goes on to state, oh no, it's not him, never mind. And Yamcha and Tien drop on down, but this mysterious figure looks to be very, very powerful in nature as we transcend into Dragon Ball Multiverse manga chapter number 32, in which basically goes back to the future Gohan timeline, as the narration goes on to state, year 774 on Earth. This story happened in the future universes 12, 14, and 15. We see androids 17 and 18 basically destroying the entire future, and up in the sky, we see future Gohan. He looks down and saying, "The infamous bastards, but I can't stop them. What's this key?" As Gohan looks out in the distance and saying, "It's a good thing I was hiding my energy. It's an alien soldier." But he's not in his Frieza form. What is he? What is that? As Gohan actually spots Pui Pui, but Pui Pui actually ends up taking off, and Gohan having to say, "I don't want to leave the cyborgs, but I must know about him." So Pui Pui's pretty much going around basically collecting energy. He's collecting energy from women, from children, and there is this very graphic image of this woman being torn in two, and this little girl with a massive hole where her heart used to be, and it's pretty insane. Like, deep down inside, I really do wish that they actually showcase this in the actual anime, because as gruesome as this is actually very, I guess you could say, accurate if alien invaders or alien entities went about, you know, destroying mankind. And we see how Gohan lands on a pile of rocks and saying, "Bastards, it's even worse than I thought." And he looks out and he spots this spaceship. As Gohan goes on to state, they're even moving on it, and he spots Babidi and Pui Pui and a few other soldiers. As he sees Babidi, and Babidi goes on to state, "That's all the power you can find me," and he drops the device on down onto the ground. And Gohan's like, "Weird, they should be quite happy that there are so few fighting forces to resist him here. Wait a minute, this key." And as Gohan looks behind him, he notices Dabura, and he's holding up Majin Buu's egg, with Dabura having to say, "I found it, master." But thankfully, Dabura did not spot Gohan as he lands on down, with Babidi having to say, "There you are, I waited so long for you." But there is clearly not enough energy here. What a pain. We'll have to travel to another planet, with Dabura having to say, "Don't judge a book by its cover, Master Babidi." As Pui Pui goes on to state, "Yes, the Earthlings I saw had no energy at all, but their shots gathered a power of about 250 killies." Which Babidi is shot by saying 200 killies per shot? Perfect, we stay here. "Dear Dabura, get the cocoon inside our ship, shall we?" And then out of nowhere, Gohan cries out by saying, "Leaving this planet was actually the best decision." As Gohan goes on to follow by saying, "Get back in that ship of yours and leave this planet and forget about it." In which Babidi looks up and saying, "Oh, what a beautiful surprise." And Dabura replying by saying, "He has a lot of power, and it looks like he can provide much more." With Babidi going back in his ship by saying, "Very well, Earthling, we'll leave now." As they begin to take the egg, and Gohan having to say, "Wait a minute, they're actually leaving?" And Dabura having to say goodbye, or not, teleporting behind Gohan, wrapping himself around him. And it's actually very interesting to see future Gohan versus Dabura, because as Gohan's being held there, Gohan goes on to note, "Incredible, faster than even the cyborgs," implying that Dabura is much quicker than androids 17 and 18. And down below, Pui Pui gathers up the little energy box and trying to stick Gohan and draining his energy, but Gohan manages to kick Pui Pui away and powering up, knocking Dabura behind him. And with that being said, we see how Gohan looks at Dabura and saying, "You hid your power very well. I should have been careful when you lowered your power level." As Gohan goes on to reply to Dabura and saying, "Same to you. You are fast. Surprising me isn't something everyone can do." As Dabura goes on to state, "I'm not everyone," and he misses the shot, but Gohan's still able to dodge around Dabura and elbowing him in the back of the neck, but Dabura still stands in resiliency in trying to fight back against Gohan. So basically, we have ourselves a future Gohan versus Dabura battle, and I'll be the first one to admit, I really did enjoy future Gohan's fight with Dabura a lot more than present Gohan did in the anime against Dabura myself, because Dabura goes on to state, "No one can compete with the Lord of Darkness," and he spits on Gohan. However, Gohan's quick enough to actually dodge the spit, and it actually ends up hitting Pui Pui. And Gohan's like, "Damn it, it's so petty for a warrior." And Babidi's like, "What are you doing, stupid?" And now Dabura and Gohan are having a really intense fight, because that's when Dabura goes on to state, "Yes, you're right, Master. What am I doing?" As he goes back down onto the ground and saying, "You should thank Master Babidi. Your end is postponed. If you want us to leave, you'll have to follow me inside. Oh, and you can destroy the top of the ship if you like, but it won't come close to reaching us, just letting you know." So Gohan's standing there and saying, "It's probably a bluff, but it's surely a trap, but I can't let them stay here." And Gohan follows them back in the ship. Gohan aims at the door and saying, "I know you're watching me, open this door or I'll destroy it." And then next thing you know, the door actually opens, and Babidi's getting really frustrated and saying, "You stupid demon, you almost killed him. I won't get energy from a statue." And that's when Dabura's like, "I'm sorry, master," but Babidi goes on to state, "You've told me that he's quite strong, so I've sent our little minions." And Gohan's in the dark, and obviously enough, reminiscing back to his father, Gohan ends up encountering Yakan. And Gohan looks out in the background and saying, "Where am I? What happened?" And Yakan goes on to reply by saying, "You've been transported to my planet, in the dark, my perfect environment to fight. So you're back, little brother," with another Yakan having to appear, and one of the Yakans having to say, "Merrick, I need you to neutralize this one without killing him for the master." And that's when Merrick goes on to state, "Still a slave to that worm? Say, the light of your prey is magnificent. Why don't you share it together instead?" And Gohan's like, "Share my light?" With Yakan having to reply by saying, "You know I can't. Master Babidi needs his energy." With Merrick having to say, "You would prefer to share this wonder with a shriveling midget instead of your own sister?" And that's when Gohan's like, "This thing is a female? Your sister's right, you know, family comes first." And Yakan's like, "Well said." So they begin to try to absorb Gohan's energy, and we get to see how Babidi is saying to himself, "I have to fix things," because it looks like Yakan is arguing with his sister as to who's going to eat and absorb Gohan's light first, and we get to see how there is an internal struggle between the two, with Gohan having to reply by saying, "So, all of these men are actually slaves to this Babidi's power. This is terrible. What if he does that to me too? Vegeta was right. I've been too kind. I have to be ruthless." And that's when Gohan goes on to attack both Yakan and his sister, which is pretty interesting because Gohan's trying to be as ruthless as possible in taking them down, which he inevitably does, as Gohan goes on to state, "Babidi, get me back now, or I'll destroy the entire ship." As Babidi goes on to reply by saying, "You fool, you will be stuck here forever in this world with no light. You aren't very clever." That's when Gohan says, "I'm a Saiyan. It won't be difficult at all for me to get back. I can count to 3. 1, with Gohan having to say to himself, "I hope he doesn't know what a Saiyan is." 2, and then finally all of a sudden he gets back into Babidi's ship as Gohan goes on to state, "I made it." See how Vegeta holds his word, and that's when Gohan begins to actually attack the ship. And it's most interesting because we've never seen anybody actually attack the ship, and that's when Babidi goes on to state, "What? He was pure of heart, and because of this, I couldn't make him my slave, and now he lies. Dabura, have you received your punishment yet?" And Dabura's like, "Yes, I gave my energy to the cocoon," and it looks like Dabura actually sacrificed his own energy in replacement in calling upon Majin Buu, as Dabura goes on to state, "Go beat this man until all of his energy is absorbed by the ship," which of course that was Babidi giving out the orders to Dabura, as Dabura agrees in meeting up with Gohan in the ship, as Gohan and Dabura engage in a very ruthless battle. And keep in mind, this is Dabura after he had sacrificed a bit of his energy in giving that over to Majin Buu, and that's when Gohan goes on to state he's much slower and much weaker than before, and that's when Gohan is actually getting beat down by Dabura and saying, "But he's still just as tough." So Gohan, even though he knows that Dabura is basically weaker and much slower than before, he's still able to give Gohan more of a difficult time as they engage in punches and kicks and elbows and knee strikes, as Gohan goes on to state, "He's much slower now for some reason. I can win this time." And then that's when Gohan starts to turn up the heat in putting the beats on Dabura, as we later on get to see how Dabura gets pushed back so far that he literally gets blown through the door, in which brings him to Babidi and the Majin Buu cocoon. And that's when Babidi goes on to state, "Poor, poor, tired creature. You can only serve me as a shield now." And that's when Gohan tells Babidi, "I'll get rid of you, then this thing, you have no reason to stay in this world." And that's when Babidi says, "If you attack, he'll die first. Such a pure heart like you would never strike a wounded man down." And that's when Gohan goes for the Masenko, and he actually does it. He shoots off Babidi, he shoots Dabura, but of course we get to see how the egg is still intact. And Babidi goes on to state, "How can that be? You'll never damage it. You have no idea how powerful my Buu is. A power that exceeds imagination and the limits of the universe." And that's when Babidi goes on to state, "Papada papa," and then we see how the egg begins to hatch, with Babidi having to say, "Don't worry, my dear Buu, I had to use the energy of the worthless peons working for me to get you back. I know you need more, but I'll get you more later, after you killed this nuisance." And then once the egg hatches, just like in the anime and in the manga, nothing appears. And that's when Babidi goes on to state, "Buu, answer me. It's Babidi. the son of your creator, and Gohan's like, smells like rotten food and candy, what's in the egg? And Babidi's shocked by saying it's impossible. No! As the narration goes on to state, Son Goku would have spared the life of this miserable creature. Piccolo and Vegeta would have destroyed him completely. Years of fighting against the cyborgs had permanently made Gohan take advantage of his suffering, as Gohan flies on up and not thinking twice and charging up for his Kamehameha, and finally shooting off Babidi and the egg as Gohan charges up and firing off the Kamehameha. As the narration goes on to state, Gohan had proved once again that he was the worthy successor to his father, saving the Earth and even the universe without even knowing it. As we get to see a few days later, Kibito comes up to the Supreme Kai and saying Babidi's ship was seen going to Earth, which basically closes off the manga chapter. And I will say that we don't really know as to what stage Gohan was in terms of Super Saiyan for him to basically kill off Dabura, basically destroy Majin Buu's egg, and which I do think was the downside to this manga chapter in seeing how strong future Gohan was, and also touching up on the androids and what happened to them in that particular timeline, because it's most interesting how Dabura showed up and Dabura having to have a clear advantage over Gohan during their first encounter. I really did find it weird how Dabura let Gohan slip by, because if Babidi knew that Gohan was a worthy successor in providing energy, then he should have just allowed Dabura to fight him in weakening Gohan and allowing him to drain that energy. But I think that this manga chapter definitely showed the dumb side to Babidi, and as overall I think that everything made sense in piecing everything together in terms of Frieza wanting the Dragon Balls and seeing how Tapion fought Krillin, and everything I think pieced together very well, except for the fact that if Dabura was clearly stronger, or at least had the advantage over Gohan, then they should have ultimately capitalized on that in making Dabura beat Gohan as a result of gaining energy. So in the end, guys, let me know what you all think down in the comment section below. What are your overall thoughts as to these two manga chapters? Which chapter did you guys enjoy the most? And what are your overall thoughts on the battle between Krillin and Tapion and Gohan and Dabura? Thank you all so much for watching, guys. Once again, if you guys are new to this channel, don't forget to go ahead and punch that subscribe button, guys. Slap a like down below if you guys enjoyed. Also, if you guys would like to read more up on the Dragon Ball Multiverse fan manga, I will leave the official playlist down below for you guys to go ahead and check out and enjoy. Tune back in for more, and I'll be seeing each and every single one of you guys in the next video. Take it easy, everybody. Cue my motherfucking outro, bitch.